They are caring more about punching holes in the darkness than they are. My life is His. I have committed my life to Him to use me any way He pleases in order to make His name great. That's suffering for Jesus. And He's saying that is what is the norm in this kingdom of what is it that makes you cry or happy or sad or miserable? What is it that every single one of these men were discouraged in their life, but they did something that I want us. All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to those of you that are in Phoenix. We are glad you're here. If you're new, we are super glad you're joining us today. If you are watching us online, apps, Roku, YouTube, any way you found us, we are glad you're joining us today too. If you don't know that, you don't even have to be here, which I always say I'm glad you are, because I always tell you this, if no one showed up and it was just David, he doesn't think I'm that funny. So he wouldn't even laugh at my jokes. Okay, what was I saying? I lost my whole train of thought on that now that I was watching him walk by, rolling his eyes at me. Okay, anyway, if you want to know more about our ministry, go online to womensbiblestudy.com. There you can get handouts for today's lesson, watch past lessons, all that. Oh, I know what I was telling you. You can download our apps, Android, Apple, Windows. Go into your search, your app store, Women's Bible Study, pink box, that's us. Hashtag watch us or something. How was that? That was pretty good. I don't even know what that means, but okay. Okay, what do I have to tell you? Oh, we're in the middle of a series. Yeah, I'm all over the board today. Wilderness Deception. This is our series that we're in. We are doing the life of Moses, and we called it Wilderness Deception. I tell you this each week because I want us to realize that the times that you go through in your life that aren't really that great, the tragedy, the heartache, whatever it is, something hits you financially, health-wise, whatever, and you're going through this wilderness time. We think it's the worst time in the world, and we're miserable, and we hate our life, and nothing makes us happy. But what we're saying is I think we're deceived into thinking that it's the worst time, when in fact, I believe it probably can be one of the best times, because the wilderness is one of those times that if you do it right, we always say, you can get closer to God, you can get a better relationship with Him, you'll pray more, you'll love Him more, you'll trust Him more. So that's why I think we're deceived into thinking it's a bad place. I realized this with my sister-in-law. My brother, I told you, was really sick. We'll talk a little bit about him today. But I had dinner over at their house the other night, and while we were sitting around, I looked at my brother and I said, tell me what you learned from this whole experience. And so he told me what he learned, and then the next day I got a text from my sister-in-law. And she said, Lisa, you asked that question last night, and I thought about it all night. And I realized what I learned is how much closer I became to God through all of the bad stuff that happened. Like, it grew my relationship to whole new levels with Him. So that's why I think that the wilderness is not a really bad place to be. Okay, I told you last week that I was going to have a new grandbaby, all right? So she was going to have the baby on Wednesday. That was the plan. We were going to leave here. She would have been induced in the morning, have the baby. All goes good. They never had a bed for her, so she couldn't be induced. So Thursday morning, she wakes up at 4 o'clock and goes into labor on her own, which is kind of cool. Now, here's my problem, because apparently children, when my grandchildren are born, it needs to revolve around my schedule. So I had a luncheon at noon, and I had a dinner at 5, and so I'm trying to think when this baby's going to come that I can actually fit it into my schedule. Okay, so she ends up, they call at 6, and they're like, we're at the hospital, and she's in labor. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. She's one of these girls that when you have a baby, it's 12 hours for one and 24 for the other. So I wasn't even remotely worried. 7 o'clock. Hey, Mom, she's at a 7. Okay, well, 10 is a baby. I dilated to 7, and I'm like, oh, I better get ready. So I'm like walking around the house, putting my makeup on, getting dressed. Get in the car at 8. They call. She's at a 9. Yeah, and I'm like, I'm 30 to 40 minutes from the hospital. So I found a cute little gift. This is what I sent him. All right, this was me on my way to the hospital. Maybe. There you go, okay. Okay, so this was everybody else that I was trying to pass. Okay, you have to look at the next one. Okay, do the next one. Yeah. That just so made me laugh. I'm sorry, but I was trying to get there, and that's how everyone was driving. They were making me nuts. So anyway, we get to the hospital just in time. I have great daughters too, but they always let me be in there when the baby's born, which is super awesome. And so we got there, and at 9, she had the baby at like 9:20. So it was like the perfect day. 9 pounds, 12 ounces. Oh, yeah. And she's little. So this is a big, big baby. So someone said, oh my gosh, you birthed a toddler, which is probably true. So, okay, made it to my lunch, made it to my dinner. Life was happy. So, okay, today I want to talk about fear because we live in a world where fear is one of those things that just literally can grab a hold of us and it grips us tightly and we can't breathe. And it's just that moment when you hear the news or someone shows up at your door with bad news or you see, like it's just that moment that just everything goes numb in your body. And we feel that especially now because the world is changing so ridiculously fast. Many of you are fearful of doing things like going to the mall. Some of you don't even want to go to a football game. Clearly now, after what just happened the other night, no one wants to go to an outdoor concert. Like that was just absolutely horrific. But we live in this world where things like that are just, it's just random now. And you don't even want to go get on an airplane. You don't know if it's going to make it. You don't want to go to Paris anymore because it's just all of these things that we're just so fearful about. We turn on the news, it's like a nuclear war. What's going to happen with Russia? What's going to happen with North Korea? And then on top of all that craziness, you're like, but I can't pay my bills, and my husband just lost his job, and I don't want to take my kids to school because I just don't know what's going to happen. And all of this fear just comes upon us. Some of us are afraid of dying, and so you fear that. A lot of you, I say, are afraid of living. You don't even know how to live because just everything around you makes you scared. A lot of you are nervous because of weather patterns. You've got hurricanes and tornadoes and global warming, and a lot of you are afraid to leave the house. You don't want to get on a bus. You don't want to get on an airplane. You don't want to do anything. You're scared to go to the doctor, the dentist, like whatever it is that's your fear, it's just something that happens to us, and it's that moment where you're just paralyzed by thinking about doing what you're afraid to do. I had that feeling this summer when I told you my brother was really sick. I don't think I ever told you what he had, but he ended up having MRSA. I don't know if I told you that. My sister-in-law had two people that she knew of that literally died from this. So when they heard the word MRSA, you can just feel the fear that just went through their body because they know, I mean, someone said there's like a 50-50 chance on life and death. So we really didn't know how this was going to go, but I don't know. If you know me, which some of you do, some of you don't, I'm one of these weird people that I'm not a big fearful person, and I don't worry about things like germs. Rob's a Purell guy, and everything's Purell, and he's like, do you want some? And I'm like, no, if I do, my body will react, and then I'll get really sick, so we're just not even going to go there. So I just don't worry about it. So before we knew he had MRSA, I'd go to the hospital in my flip-flops. Okay, I have cuts all over my feet. I take my shoes off, running around the hospital floor, barefoot, not even thinking anything about it, okay? So then we hear he has MRSA. And you can't even get into his room without the gloves and the gown and the whole bit. So I stayed with him the first few nights. I had like the midnight to 8 in the morning shift. So I brought my blanket and I brought my pillow. And I was laying there at night just watching him, making sure he was going to be okay. And the next morning I woke up and my sister-in-law came in and she goes, I forgot to tell you. Yesterday, Scott threw up all over your blanket. Okay, this was the blanket I was wrapped in all night long. And she goes, I tried to wipe it off the best I could. I meant to tell you, I forgot. Okay, that person who doesn't fear, I was like, I just was like panic-stricken because I'm like, okay, I don't have time to get MRSA, and I'm just not ready to die yet, and I have to put a lesson together, and this just isn't going to work for me. So, but it's just that moment where you just think like this gripping feeling when you think, okay, something drastic is just about ready to change in my life. Now, last week, we've been talking about Moses. He came upon the burning bush, and God tells Moses he has this job for him to go back to Egypt and get the millions of Israelites out, get them into their homeland. And the thing with Moses is that we have no idea what kind of faith that he actually had. Like, we don't know, like David, he wrote Psalms, he loved God. Moses, we don't really know. Like, did he do a Torah study for his neighborhood? We just don't know. There's just no information about that. And so for him, when he sees this burning bush, it could have been his first encounter with God. It could have been his 100th. We really don't know. So it's kind of an odd encounter. So I found something, and it actually made me laugh. This goes back to those of you, once again, that don't have any idea what newspapers are. Along with Dear Abby column, like we talked about last week, in the newspaper, they had sections called comic strips, okay? Instead of YouTube and funny videos like John Chris does, people would actually draw funny things out, and then you'd laugh. That's kind of how, that was what made us laugh. So there was this comic strip, and it was called Hagar the Horrible. And there was one strip in it that said, you see him, Hagar's kneeling praying. And this is what he says to God. It's not easy to believe in you, God. We never see you. How come you never show yourself? How do we even know you even exist? And so the next little strip that's on there shows this, a flower. We'll put this one up because it'll go for, okay. So right next to Hagar is this flower blooming. And then the very next little strip is this. He looks out and he sees a volcano erupting. And then the next one, he sees the eclipse of the sun where it's totally dark. Next one, he sees a shooting star going through the sky. Next one is a tidal wave, and it drenches Hagar to where he's completely drenched when this happens. Then he looks up to see this, lightning. Next one, a burning bush. And then the last one, a stone rolled away from the entrance to the tomb. Hagar pulls himself up in this little strip, and he says this to God. I think we put that in there. Then he said this, okay, I give up. Every time I bring up the subject of wondering if you exist, I get all these interruptions. And that made me laugh. But when I saw that, I thought, you know what? What you and I just look out and see all of those things, we just go, but it's God trying to get our attention and trying to say, look, there's something bigger going on here. So we're so happy that when Moses saw the burning bush, he didn't think of it like, this is an interruption. He really got that this was a visitation basically from God. So let's start Exodus 3. God tells Moses this, go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. I have promised to bring you out from your misery in Egypt into the land, and it goes through all the lands. Verse 18, the elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Now, a great plan. God's like, look, Moses, go to all the elders in Israel, tell them, go to Pharaoh, say, hey, this is what we want to do. God says we want to just leave here for a few days. Now, in Moses' mind, he's thinking, perfect, great idea. Couple-week journey, get him into the land, I'm home, all is good. But then God tells him this verse in verse 19. But I know that the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. And I think for Moses, when he heard those words, I think it was that moment of sheer terror. Because he knew Pharaoh. He had been raised in the palace. He knew how brutal Pharaoh was to the Israelites. He knew that going in and saying, hey, let go the 2 million people, they're your workforce. 2 million people that worked for Pharaoh, he's just going to let them go? He knows Pharaoh well enough to know that that's probably not going to happen. I was thinking it would be like walking into China and saying, hey, president of China, you're not treating all your factory workers very well. We're going to let them all go. Okay. Now, that would destroy China because that's their whole business. We wouldn't have anything that said made in China if that happens. It would be a disaster for everybody. But for Moses, he had this insider information. He knew what the palace was like. And he knew when he went back there. Now, his adopted grandfather was the Pharaoh, but by this time he had died. And so there was a new Pharaoh, but I'm sure he had heard about Moses. So for Moses, he's going to have to go back in front of this Pharaoh and say, hey, remember me? I'm like the turncoat adopted grandson. And yeah, I killed an Egyptian and I took the Israelite side and now I'm here on behalf of them. And you have all of this crazy stuff and he had to be terrified. So I want to talk today about fear because I think that so many of us here are so afraid of every little thing that goes on around us. Here's what fear is. Fear is a negative emotion caused by a real or a perceived threat to our well-being. Now, right off the bat, God gives us something in us that makes us have that moment of fear. Like if someone, like the other night with the whole shooting in Las Vegas, if you hear gunfire, you should be afraid and you should run. I mean, that's a real threat. If someone has a gun to your head, that's a real threat. The problem is that we spend so much time being afraid of things that are perceived threats. They're not even real. It's like, if I go to the concert, somebody may get a gun and shoot everyone. Okay, that's just a perceived threat, and you're constantly worried and fearful about all of these things. You can't sleep at night because you're afraid someone's going to come into your house and shoot you. You have no reason to think that, but it's something that's perceived that really isn't happening. We have 7 children. 5 of them are blessed, actually cursed, with OCD. So if any of you deal with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, they don't have the washing hand kinds, they have the mind. So it's like their brain locks on something and it will not let it go for anything. And it's exhausting and it's so difficult. So thankfully we have a couple of kids that are on medication for it and it really just helps them. So I'm a big proponent that God gives doctors and medicine to people. So I'm kind of all for that. But one of them was just a disaster. And so finally we got him to go to the doctor, and he went to see a psychologist, and he said, Mom, as I was explaining to her all of my OCD thoughts, and so he starts telling them to me. And I was so shocked. I was like, honey, I had no idea that you were this was all this going on around in your head. And he said, Mom, my life exhausts me. And see, that's what I think fear does. It exhausts you. It just makes life not even fun, especially when we're fearful of things that most likely will never, ever even happen. 5-year-old Johnny was in the kitchen. His mother was making supper, and she said, go into the pantry and get a can of tomato soup. But he was terrified because he didn't know what was in the pantry. It was dark, and he says, Mom, I'm scared. And she said, that's okay, honey. Jesus will be with you. So Johnny walked to the door and slowly opened it, and it was dark, and he said, I'm not going in there, because he could just imagine all the things that were going to jump out at him. And finally he came up with an idea. So he said, hey, Jesus, if you're in there, would you hand me that can of tomato soup? I'm like, aw. But see, there's all these perceived fears that he had that weren't even valid, but because that's that perceived threat. And see, so many of us fear things like that. And I call them the what ifs. What if? For Moses, well, what if Pharaoh kills me? What if Pharaoh throws me in prison? What if the Israelites laugh me out of town? What if God does not really actually show up? Now, I told you, I'm not really a very fearful person. And I get that. I think I used to be. I don't feel like I am so much anymore, because the moment that I learned that God is sovereign over this world and over my life and that I'm his child, I just don't tend to worry about too much. I just don't. But what I would do would be sing a song. Like Mercy Me came out with a song one time. I'm not recommending anyone ever does what I just did. They came out with a song called Bring the Rain. Now here's a couple of words. Here's me in the car singing this song at the top of my lungs. Bring me anything that brings you glory. Cal, I know there'll be days when this life brings me pain, but if that's what it takes to praise you, Jesus, bring the rain. Okay, who sings that? Don't ever sing it. I will never sing that song again. But that was me. Bring it on, God. And I knew that the minute he would bring it on, it would be like, I know I'm going to be fine because I'm going to handle it, because you're going to give me the strength, and this goes on, and I will never sing that song again. Okay, so just an FYI on that. So I just knew that until God brought the rain this summer in torrential rainfall. And I told you my dad has been so sick. Those of you that asked, he is home. I think I've told you that. He's still he's still working on trying to walk by himself. He's still trying to work through his mind and things of that. So that's awesome. But at the time, we had no idea if he was going to live. My brother, we had no idea if he was going to live. And on top of that, we had this whole stupid business deal that Rob had been working on that was supposed to be done in January that still wasn't done. And for this, it was supposed to be our future. Like, it was how we were going to retire. We knew if we could get this sold, we could. The great part about this is that we could put more time and effort into ministry. We wouldn't have to worry about finances at home. And we're getting older, and it's just like that. This was just the way it was going to work for us. We realized that that wasn't going to happen. By the time this whole thing ended, it was like, oh, this is not a very good deal. And so suddenly what happened is I began to fear. And I started to be like, we can't do this deal, Rob. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work for our future. And how are we going to do it? And what if we get sick? And what if we run out of money? What if we don't have insurance anymore? And we can't, this just went on and on. What if Cheyenne wants to get married and we can't afford a wedding? And Dusty wants to go to dental college, and I'm like, who's going to pay for that? This was just on and on and on all summer long. And that once confident, bring on the rain, Jesus, I was literally a disaster. So it was so bad one day. I was sitting on the front deck with our kids up at the cabin, and we were talking about this business deal. I burst into tears, so upset over the whole thing, and I said to them, I don't even think I'm a Christian. That's how bad it got for me. I was like, I just have no faith, no trust, no nothing, and I was terrified. So I want to talk about 5 ways for you and I to be able to get over fear, and hopefully that this will help you because it helped me. Now, we have the 5 things that are going to be in pink. The first one is this. Do what God says to do in the Bible. Now, some of you say, well, that's just easy, but it's really not. When God tells you to do something about fear, you have to actually do it, not just read the verse. So what I'm doing is I'm illustrating this point, most of the points today, from a book called Fearless. Here's a picture of it up here. It's by Sherry Fuller. If you are a fearful person, you need to get this book because it really, really is very, very good. But she talked about in here, she gave a story of a woman named Esther. Esther was a nurse at an outpatient oncology center. Esther was a believer. She loved Jesus. She would pray every morning for wisdom, help me with my patients, guidance. So she got to work this Friday morning. She came upon one of her really, really nice, sweet, elderly patients, and she noticed that her platelet counts were low. And so she wasn't sure whether she should give chemo or not. So she called the doctor. She could not get a hold of him. The other nurse there said, oh, no, he's already requested it, so you're fine to give it to her. So she gave it to her. A few minutes later, after it was all done, the doctor called and said, do not under any circumstances give her chemo. It will kill her. Now, Esther is terrified. You know that moment. It's like that moment where your stomach drops, and he freaked out on her. You are going to be responsible for her death. How could you be so incompetent? And just on and on. By the end of the day, she's a mess. She's on her way up that day to a women's conference someplace. And all she could think about is, what if this lady dies? What if I lose my nursing license? The worst is, what if I go to jail for killing this woman? And by the time she gets to the conference, she cannot even think about God because she's so overwhelmed with fear. The man that was teaching just happened to be teaching on this verse, Philippians 4. Be anxious for nothing. Now, you and I read that and we go, oh, okay, that's easy. I'll just not be anxious about that. That's not true, okay? It just doesn't happen that way. But God says, I need you to be anxious for nothing. I need you to do this. By prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts. Now, this is why I say you have to do what the Bible says to do when it comes to fear. So, let's look at the first little green thing here. We're going to break this verse down 4 places. The first thing it says is pray. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything prayer. That means whatever you are fearful about. God, I'm afraid to get on the freeway and drive. God, I'm afraid to go to the dentist. God, I'm so afraid for this lady. I'm so afraid that this lady's going to die. Like, whatever your fear is, you have to stop. You have to go before the Lord, and you have to say, God, I am terrified of this. I'm praying about this. I'm asking you to come in and to do something in this situation. The second one is this, praise. What it says, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Now, I will tell you this. I don't like that, okay? I not only don't like it, I don't do it. And I wish that I could say that I did. I wish I could say, oh, all summer I just praised Jesus for all the bad things that went on. No, I was mad at him. Never once did I say, thank you, God, my dad's in the hospital. Thank you, God, my brother might die. Thank you that this business deal sucks. Okay, sorry, but that's how I felt. But I never once said that. I just didn't. And yet, the Bible says if you want to get over fear, this is what you have to do. And I don't even think this means like, thank you, God, that my dad's sick. I think it's, God, thank you for what you're going to teach me. God, thank you for what you're going to show me through this whole thing, that you're faithful and that I can trust you. And God, thank you for this opportunity that you're going to use in my life to grow closer to you. So I don't even know that it's so much just thank you for, making someone sick or dying. I don't know that that's. Then 3, this peace. God says, you guys want peace instead of fear? That's how you're going to get it. Once you pray and you thank him, the peace of God, which surpasses, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Now, she added a 4th one, which I thought this was really good. Look at this one. Focus on the positive attributes of God. Now, I thought this was really good because you pray and you thank him and you're waiting for peace, but this is how I got peace this summer. God, I know that you love me. I know that I'm your child. I know that nothing ever happens in my life that you don't know about. God, I know that you have a purpose for all of this. I'm trusting you. You're big. You can heal. You can do whatever you want. For Esther, it would probably be, God, I know you're so big. You're in charge of life and death. God, I know you're and see, what happens is when we do that, we start focusing on how great God is. And when we do that, our fear gets less and less. She said that it worked for a minute, Esther, when she started doing this, and then the fear would grip her again. And she decided instead of just letting the fear take hold, she would do it again. So she would pray and praise and think of, pray God's attributes. And then she would do this again, get fearful. This went on back and forth again. And she said finally, she realized that the more she did this, the fear left quicker and stayed away longer. She said when she got done with the 3 days of this conference, she was ready to go with whatever happened. She said she went from despair and fear to complete and utter confidence in God. And this brings us to our second thing on what to do, whatever the outcome. Look at this. Second thing you have to do is face your fear. You have to face it, and then you have to play it all the way to the end. I've said this before. This is what I do when I get scared of things. For me, I had to play my fear all the way to the end. What if we run out of money? Okay. Well, will you lose our house? Okay. Well, where are you going to live? I don't know. Maybe I'll go to a homeless shelter. Okay. Well, will you get food? Yeah, they'll feed me. Will you get clothes? Someone will give me something to wear. So play to the end. Am I going to be okay? And the answer is yeah. Clearly not living in the lifestyle that I'm used to, but am I going to be okay? And I think that's where you have to go when you play it to the end. You go, when it's all said and done, is it going to work out? Probably not how I want it, but will you be okay? The answer is yes. Some of you are driving your children nuts because you're so clinging and hanging on to them. You're like, I don't want them to play sports because he might play football, get hit, be a paraplegic, and then it ruins the rest of my life because I'll have to take care of him. Well, okay, play that to the end. What if he does become a paraplegic? Not even that, but maybe in a car accident. It's like, so what happens? Yeah, your life will never be the same. But will you be okay? Yeah, God will provide, and he'll bring you help, and you'll figure it out. You're going to be okay. Some of you are ruining your marriages because you're so fearful that your husband's going to leave you. So you're jealous, and you're controlling, and you just cling, and you're just doing nothing but pushing your husband away. And you're so afraid because you've never worked a day in your life, and you're thinking, if my husband leaves me, what am I going to do, and how will I live? Here's the deal. Play it to the end. He walks out the door today. What happens to you? I just know this. God will take care of you. If you are a child of God, that is a promise to you. Some of you are like, I'm getting ready to marry this person, but I'm so afraid. I was thinking about this on the way in. One of my daughter-in-laws, she was terrified to marry my son. And the reason for it is she said, I was so afraid. I loved him now, and I was so excited, but I kept thinking, what if in 3 months I wake up and say, I don't love him? What am I going to do? But see, then you play it all the way to the end. Okay, you're with that person for 50 or 60 years of your life. Will you make it? Yeah. Do you pray more? Yep. Do you ask God to give you love for your husband? Yep. Do you see what I'm saying? If you just play all your fears to the end, trust me, what comes out at the other end is a great God that will give you everything you need from point A to point B. Some of you are like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to get cancer and die. Well, let me tell you something. You play that all the way to the end and you die, you win. If you're a follower of Jesus, you step into eternity where there's no death, no suffering, no nothing. And see, to me, when you play that whole death thing to the end and you lose, you really win. So that's not even an issue. Most of us are like, if I get cancer and die, what will happen to my children? What will happen to my husband? I don't know. I just look around and see the people in here that have had people that you know that have died that have children, and you know what? They're fine. God just comes in, steps in, takes care of them. That's just what happens. So for those of you that are living in this whole so worried about something that's going to happen, you need to play that out to the end and make that stop. I got this email from someone. She wrote me and she said, I think it's on there. She said, this is what she said. I have everything to be happy, but I'm always scared. I suffer from severe depression and anxiety. I had a very traumatic delivery when I delivered my daughter, and I've always had a phobia with hospitals. I had her 4 years ago. My life is always revolving around being afraid of ending up on hospital bed once more. I faint every time my blood is drawn. I'm in a hospital. Even to just visit someone, I want to throw up. I can't control myself. She said, I panic. I can't even see a movie with hospital scenes. There's times I just cry and cry and cry. I was laughing because I said, well, that's not funny, but I said, she probably doesn't watch Grey's Anatomy very much, is my thinking. Or Chicago, what? Chicago, what's the new Chicago one? Med, there you go, yeah. I can't watch those either. I'm not a big, Anyway, she says, my husband wants a second child. We've been trying for about a year. The anxiety of being in the hospital again, going through the checkups once more destroys me. But at the same time, I want to make my husband happy. He's a great man, wants one more, so do I, but I just can't control, basically, the fear of it all. So I wrote her back and I said this exact point. You've got to face your fears and play it out to the end. Like, okay, think about it. What if you do get pregnant and you have to go into the hospital and then you have to get some shots and then something happens and then there's blood and then the baby has to be taken from a C-section? Like, literally, what is your worst fear? Now, will it be painful? Yeah. Will you be a little nervous? Yeah. Will you make it? Yes. You really will. Play that thought to the end. Well, what if something tragic happens to the baby? Okay, there's a lot of people that have lost children. And if you ask them, they'll say, you know what? It was really the hardest thing I've ever done. But God gave me everything I needed to make it through. So see, when you and I play our fears to the end, I think it's a good thing. Realize this 98% of everything you and I fear will never happen. And the 2% that does, God is going to give you every single thing you need to make it through. We have to learn to trust God to the very end. My sister-in-law, she had to learn this. My brother was retired, and they just bought a boat, and they bought a motorhome, and their whole goal was to go fishing all over the United States. They were so excited. They just got the motorhome in right before he got sick. And during this whole process, she told me, she said, you know, Lisa, I could grasp the life part and I could grasp the death part. She said, I could handle either one of those. She said, but it's this in-between stage that I didn't know if I could handle. What if he could never walk again? What if we never could leave our house again? What if he was on medicine the rest of his life? Like, what would happen? And she had to really come to terms with, you know what? It would be okay. It would not be the life I thought it was going to be, but it would be okay because God will place you where he needs you for the moment, and you will be okay. There's a woman that was afraid to fly, and she never looked out the window because she was terrified to even know she was that high in the sky. She said one day she just peeked open that window and looked out, and she was so amazed at what was below. Snow-clad mountains, things she could never see from the ground. She saw cities with lights on. She saw just amazing clouds from the top view. And she said, what I realize is that the only way to defeat fear is to call its bluff. Do what you're afraid of. Face whatever it is and say, I'm not going to let my fear win. I was walking on the beach this summer, and I was watching the surfers out, and I was thinking to myself, I thought, you know what's really weird? My kids do not like the beach. They just don't. They like the beach. They don't like the ocean. And I realized why, because they like to go boogie boarding, but this is what they come in contact with when they do. Here's our next picture. There you go. Stingrays. Okay, if you've ever been bit by one, Micah was stung. My brother-in-law was stung, and Jesse's friend. I mean, literally, they're running out into the ocean, and Jesse goes, "Oh, Scotty, be careful of the stingrays. Shuffle your feet." And just then one got him. I have never seen grown men so sick and so shaking. The pain is unbearable. And so I was thinking about this. I say, now I understand why people don't like to go out into the ocean. Now, I was thinking, what kind of animal am I terrified of? Because I'm kind of, there's just certain things. So I came up with something that makes me fear from a movie. So you can tell me what movie this is. What movie is that? Okay, look at the next one. Yeah. So I realized my fear is from animals that don't even exist, which works perfectly for me. But I'm telling you, that kitchen scene in Jurassic Park 1 still terrifies me to this day. But for people going to the ocean, like if you're a surfer and you can shut that down. We don't need to watch. But if you're a surfer and you want to go ride the waves, because it's thrilling to ride the waves, I would assume. But if you actually are a surfer and you want to go out there, you got to get past the stingrays. And I think they have to play it out to the end. I think they have to say, you know what, I'm going to go surfing, but if I get stung, what's going to happen? Yeah, it's going to hurt. Yes, I'll get over it. But I don't want to miss the thrill of surfing. See, some of you here are so afraid of whatever it is, and you are missing so much in life. Play your fear out to the end. Yes, it's scary, but God will give you everything you need. And think of the freedom on the other end of that to where you can live and never worry about going to a concert or riding a plane or a bus or whatever. Like freedom, that's a great place to be. Some people are scared of flying. There was a blonde. Yeah, here it comes. And she was on a over the ocean flight for about 13 hours. She knew she was flying on a 4-engine jet plane. About an hour into it, the pilot comes on and he says, "I am so sorry to tell you that our number 1 engine just went out." And he said, "But don't worry, we have 3 other engines and these planes are good. It's just going to delay our time probably another hour." A few hours later, he got back on the intercom and he said, "I'm so sorry, our number 2 engine just went out. But no worries, we've got 2 engines that can fly, it's fine. It's just going to delay us about 3 hours now." A few hours later, he got back on and he said, "I'm so sad to tell you this, but we literally just lost engine 3. Don't worry, we can fly on 1 engine, it's no problem at all, but it's going to delay our flight now 5 hours. The blonde looks to the person sitting next to her and says, "Wow, if we lose that last engine, we're going to be up here all day." I don't know why I thought that was super cute. Oh. All right, third thing on how to get over fear. Look at the next little box here. Accept where you are. If whatever you fear just came through, you have got to stop and accept it. This happened to me twice this week. 2 things happened that I just literally, sheer panic went through my system. And I grabbed a hold of this part from Bible study. And I said, all right, God, if this really is going to happen, I'm accepting where you're bringing me. I'm accepting this moment because I have to trust that you're in it. And that's what we have to do. We'll use Marilyn's story. Marilyn was exhausted. Her husband had just got home that day. He was a recovering alcoholic. He literally ruined their whole life. He ended up just continually drinking on the job, and he lost his job, which meant there was no money to pay the bills, no money for anything. So he had been offered a rehab. She was at home with their 3 kids, fielding calls from bill collectors, carpooling with the kids, working a part-time job, trying to do everything she could, while her husband was not working or contributing in any way because of his addiction. That morning, she came in. She brought him home. She was in her bedroom, and she decided to get angry with God. And she sat on the floor and she yelled at him and she said, "You know what, God, I don't like what's going on." She said, "I have prayed for years and years. You know I'm terrified of our finances. You know I'm terrified of my husband and his stupid alcoholism. And I've prayed, I've asked, I've begged, I've taken verses." She goes, "Look at all the verses in my journal. I've written them down, I've claimed them, and you have not come through. I don't even think I believe in you anymore." Her husband was passing by the bedroom, sees her on the floor, and said, "What's wrong with you?" She looks at him like most women would look at their husband if they said that. And she's like, "Serious? What is wrong with me? How about everything? And it's all your fault," okay? We have financial problems. You have your alcohol problems. I have trusted God with everything, and yet he's come through with nothing. And he had just learned a principle at rehab, and he said to her, "Remember, acceptance is the answer to all your problems." And then he walked out into the garage. She sat on the floor, and she was sobbing by this time, and she said, "Really? I'm supposed to accept that we have bills we can't pay, and my husband's an alcoholic, and he just blew up our entire world? Like, I'm supposed to accept that?" She realized that as she was working through that she always focused on her fears. "I'm so afraid Dave will never get better. I'm so afraid of our financial problems." And finally she said, "You know what? I think he's right. I have to accept this place that I'm at." So she got her journal and she began to write this out. "Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today." She wrote down all her fears and anxieties and said, "Lord, I've prayed, tithed, worked. Nothing has opened up to us. I know that if you wanted to, you could change things in a moment or a day, but you haven't. So I accept the way things are today that I can't change, and I want you to show me what you're doing. I want to see you and trust you in the midst of our problems. I'm in the here and now." See, she had to accept where God had her. Because if God had her at this place, that just meant one thing. God needed to use her there, teach her something, and a lot of it is, when we get to those places, is God wants to teach us to trust him, not our bank accounts, not our husbands, not anything, but him. And we can't know that if we don't go through things like this. Dusty was at church the other day. He's our 19-year-old. He came home and he said, "Mom, there was a guest speaker. He was so awesome." He said he made the coolest, he was talking about this whole Romans 8:28. If you've been around church, you know this by everything. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love him, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, we say that over, we say, "Oh, God causes all things to work together." But he said, "Mom, this man made me realize that that promise is only for believers in Jesus. That's it. If you're here and you're not a Christian or you're watching us, you can't say everything is going to always work together for good, because that's not a promise to you." He said, "It was so cool, Mom. It was like this whole family, like it's like God's little family." And he says, "Look, if you're part of my family, anything that happens to you, I'm going to work together for good." And if you are in the midst of this, look at Psalms 57:1. I want you to just put this on your refrigerator. "Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy on me, for in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed." Isn't that awesome? I love Halloween from this standpoint. It has costumes, and whenever I need something for Bible study, I can only get it during Halloween. So yesterday, this is my problem, I got this really brilliant idea to go find angel wings. And I'm like, the Halloween store will have them. They do, but they're about this big. So that's not what I wanted. I wanted big, huge angel wings, and then I was going to come and make this really dramatic thing like, here's you, and here's the wings, and they're covering you. But of course, none of that happened, so you're going to have to use your imagination. But that's what it's like. It's like whatever you're going through, accept where you're at, and know this. You take refuge underneath God's wings. That's how you're going to get better. Now, here's the fourth thing. Release your life completely to Jesus. People don't understand this. Serious, they think that when you become a follower of Jesus, it's all so that you can go to heaven. That's it. And God says that's not true. When you decide to follow Jesus, what you're doing is saying, "God, I am releasing my life to you." And that means everything, your whole entire life. We see this in the Old Testament, the story Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar's the king. He builds this golden statue, and these are really great followers of God. They're Jewish boys. They love the one true God. They're not bowing down to a statue. It's not going to happen. Look at the middle of verse 15. Nebuchadnezzar says, "Hey, when you hear the music, bow down." Middle of it says this, "But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Now, we minimize that because we know the end of the story, but if you didn't, and someone walked in here today, built a big bonfire, and said, you need to deny Jesus, or I'm going to throw you into that fire. Like, that would be a horrible, horrible way to die. They're thrown into a fiery furnace, but look at their response. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he'll rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you've set up. See, they've completely released their life to God and said, here's the deal. God, I know you can get me out of this, but if you don't, I know there's a purpose behind it. And if we die, just wait, we step into eternity. Okay, we win. There's a woman by the name of Anne. She completely released her life to Jesus when she became a follower of him. She was a missionary to the China Inland Missions. She'd been there 9 years. She was on furlough. She was just getting ready to leave to go to Scotland, her hometown. She was super excited. She wanted to go and see her family and friends. It had been 9 years. She walked out her door to go catch the bus or train or however she was going to do it, just to look down the street to see the Japanese soldiers marching down. They were taking over, and they took her away. She said right before they got to her, God spoke to her and said, Anne, I want to talk to you. He said, I want to remind you of my care for you over these last 9 years. I want you to know, Anne, you're not going to be going home. Instead, you're going to be going to a Japanese prison camp. She said, I had no idea how long, but God assured me that he would be there with me the entire time. So moments later, she was taken, spent 3.5 years, near starvation, dreadful cold winters, horrible, horrible summers, cruelty, rats, disease. She said there was no Bible. The only thing she had was what she had in her memory about God. She woke up one night to a rat that was up her sleeve. So she started thinking, all right, God has me here now. What can I do? I can either sit around and be fearful the whole time. I'm so afraid of this. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid. Or I can say, all right, God, I've given my life to you. What do you want me to do here? And she helped the women and children do barricades so that the rats couldn't get in at night so that they could sleep. She shared Jesus with them. She kept telling them about God's love for them and the peace. And she said, I could not be afraid. She said, I couldn't even go with the what if questions. What if I don't survive? And what if I get sick? And what if no one rescues us? She said, I could do that because I released my life to Jesus. And I think that is one of the greatest keys to overcoming fear. Realizing that your life isn't your own. It just isn't if you've given it to him. She said she could have been overwhelmed by fear, but she knew she couldn't minister to the people that God had put in her life at that particular time. She had to get the right perspective on that. The last thing to do is to do this. Get to know this powerful God. If you and I don't know how powerful God is, that he can stop anything, do anything, he can override any decision anyone makes, if you don't know that, then you're not going to be able to, you're going to be afraid of everything. Mark 4 says this with Jesus. On that same day when evening had come, Jesus said to them, let's go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. A fierce windstorm began to blow. The waves were breaking over the boat, so they were already being swamped. Now, that would be scary. I want you to really think about that. You're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, huge storm comes up, boat's, going to sink. You're thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to drown. Not only that, if the boat capsizes, that's how we make our living. Like, how am I going to pay my bills? Like, you can just imagine all the fear of what the disciples were going through. But look where Jesus was. But Jesus was in the stern asleep on the cushion. Now, for these guys, they're looking at him like, really? You're asleep when this whole storm is going? So they woke him up and they said this, Teacher, do you not care that we're about to die? And I actually think that's funny because you and I do the exact same thing. That's the first thing we say when something bad happens. Do you not care? God, do you not care that I can't pay my bills? Do you not care that my child is sick? Do you not care that my marriage is falling apart? God, really? I love what Jesus says. He got up and sternly rebuked the wind and said to the sea, hush, be still. The wind died down as if it had grown weary, and there was at least at once a great calm, a perfect peacefulness. Jesus said to them, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith and confidence in me? I think Jesus is going, what is your problem? You have spent all of this time with me. You know I can raise people from the dead and I can make blind people see. You know I am that powerful. Why in the world are you still afraid? Look at verse 41 and look what changed. They were filled with great fear and said to each other, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? They weren't afraid of the storm anymore because I think they finally got a grip and they could see how powerful this God was that was in the boat with them. And see, I think Anne at that camp, she understood why that God allowed her to be there. She'd given her life to him, and when you know that God is that powerful that he could have taken her out of the situation, she could have left 3 hours earlier to get on the train and never happened. Like, she knows that God is that big. And when you know that, you just tend to fear less. If he does not step in for you, that just means he needs you right at the place that you're at for some reason. There was a blonde that approaches a riverbank. It's a blonde dated gay. She sees another blonde on the other side. The first one shouts and said, hey, how do I get to the other side? The other blonde says, you are on the other side. Okay. You got to think about that for a while. But the problem is they had the wrong perspective, and you and I have to get this right perspective. Look at Psalms 46:1. Here's our perspective for fear. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth should change, though the mountains slipped into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake at its swelling, though my marriage is falling apart, though I can't afford my bills, though a crazy madman just went and, put gunfire through Las Vegas, like, we don't have to fear. Here's how we do it. We say, God is our refuge and our strength. Moses was getting ready to go into a very, very frightening situation. He was 80 years old. He stuttered. He had no idea what was going to happen when he met Pharaoh face to face. But here's what he did. He made God his refuge and his strength, and that's how Moses got past his fear. When you make God your refuge and your strength, you can get past your fears also. I want you to imagine a fear-free life. Whatever you fear, I need you to face it, fight it. Do not let it win. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for all of these principles, and I pray that something will attach to each person in here, God, that they'll say, I am fearful, but I'm going to take number 1 and work on it, or number 3, or number 5. And ultimately, God, we know you are so great and so big and so powerful, and you can do anything. But God, if you put us in any one of these situations that makes us fearful, help us to make you our refuge and our strength. I pray for that in Jesus' name. Amen. By the way, I think I forgot to tell you this. Esther, when she got back from the conference, the lady got better. I know, it was like so cool. So everything she feared never even happened. The lady got better, and the doctor's like, how'd that happen? So anyway, I thought I would share that with you. So all right, see you guys next week. You have to be reading your Bible. I can't tell you. I always say this. I don't know how it changes us. It just does. The sickness, the tragedy, the death, the hit on drugs, the whatever. God wants to use, well, where did God come from? And if he created us, who created him? And how? Is that we tend to look at every battle and every problem in this natural realm. Like what I see, but see, we don't get it here. Because we think Jesus asking him in our life just means, I get to go to heaven.